I want to underline the idea no empires last forever.
We also have China emerging as one of the global superpowers, right?
Yes, of course.
Welcome to another episode of the Economic Insight, the podcast that dives deep into the world of finance, economics, and geopolitics. I'm your host, Mohammed Adnan, and today we have a very special guest, Professor Deana, a renowned macroeconomics expert and geopolitical scholar from Bocconi. He is the man who has redefined teaching at Bocconi. Welcome, Professor Deana.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thank you for my host. And I'm welcome to everybody.
Thank you. So today we'll be discussing a topic of great significance, the shift in the global superpower from the US and the possibilities of how it might change hands. To start our conversation, Professor Deana, could you provide us with an overview of the historical factors that contributed to the US becoming a dominant global superpower?
Oh, it's a very tough question. First of all, just to provide a simple definition of what is a superpower. A superpower is a country, a power much stronger than the others. The history is characterized by superpower over time. Usually we call empire, but in a sort of way is a very similar definition. So to identify the elements that characterize the rise of the United States superpower, it should be identified in the previous centuries. There are mainly two. The first is the lack of enemy at the borders. So the United States are more or less isolated from all the other countries in the world. There are just two neighbors, Canada and Mexico. They are quite close to United States. And the second element was a young and homogeneous population. And so, where homogeneous population means that mainly they all come from Europe, but they share a common view characterized by more or less universal values like freedom and democracy. So, a young population with the same values, and this was linked to a huge, a big economy. And the rise of the economy was in the United States was started in the 19th century. It was characterized by an evolution of the economy, a very good technology, and mainly the decline of the European power during the two wars. The rise of the United States as a power was during the two world war that was fought by the European countries and other countries in the world, and deeply affected the power and the economy of the European countries. And this allowed the United States to rise as a superpower. At the same time, we have the rise of Russia, the URSS, as a competitor. And so the struggle between the United States and their allies and URSS and their allies allow just to have two superpowers, United States and URSS. And finally, when at the beginning of the 90s, the URSS collapsed, the Soviets collapsed, the only superpowers was the United States that was able to shape the world according to their values and their interests. And so more or less the main elements characterized the rise of the United States as superpower should be identified in the previous centuries between the two world wars.
Okay. And now we also have China emerging as one of the global superpowers, right?
Yes, of course. Today Today, it's a very interesting period because it's characterized by a change in the characteristics of the war. Because until now, over the last 30 years, the war was characterized by a unique superpower, United States. Now we have just one superpower, the United States, but we have different competitors that they want to be a superpowers. They want to challenge the United States superpowers, powers in general. China, of course, maybe India could try to arise in the future, but depends on the evolution and the path that India decide to follow. But today, of course, we are, for the first time over the last 30 years, we have potential competitors to the United States, China.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you, Professor Deana. But the
Uh,
US has enjoyed its superpower status for several decades, right? But no empire lasts forever.
yeah.
So, considering the emerging challenges and evolving dynamics, what are the main factors that could potentially lead to a change in the global superpower status?
Okay. First of all, the key idea is that I want to underline the idea no empires last forever. So each powers, doesn't matter how strong is it, doesn't matter how big is it, each power and each superpower and each empire will find an end, will end in the future. And this is very important to understand the evolution of the relationship between the different powers over times. Take in mind that today the world is characterized by the United States superpower, but in the future, will have something different. Of course, the today the main competitors to the United States superpower is China. So two the main factors that could potentially lead to a change in the paradigm is the presence of a competitors, China, and the decline of United States superpower. So we need to have a shift. We need a competitor, and today we have a competitors, more or less, China, and you should have also a decline in the United States superpower. To be a real competitor, China don't need, oh, of course, need a strong economy, need a strong military power, but also a dynamic economy, a military power, tanks, airplanes, navies. But this is not enough because you need to build up an alternative to the United States. You need to be able to shape the world according to your values and interests. And today, China is not able yet to shape the reality according to its interest. This is the main difference between China and United States. United States is a superpower because not only has a dynamic economy, not only has a huge power, military power, not only the has the capability to innovate, to improve the technology, but is also able to shape the board less than 10 years ago, but more or less to shape the world according to its preference. And China has not yet this capability.
Okay. So with the ongoing changes in global power dynamics, how can we assess the strength of different countries? I know you mentioned that a country needs to have a military power and economic power, technological innovation. But what are the key aspects that a country needs to excel in to become a global superpower?
Okay, of course. We talk about military power, economy, technology, Of course, today these are the main elements that characterize a superpower, but these are not enough. Think about Europe. Europe is a huge economy, very big, has a huge population. It's a country, it's a reality where we can innovate, we have a lot of technology. We have quite enough huge military power. Okay, it's just the sum of the military power of different countries, but in Europe we not have the will to be a superpower. Think about Japan. Japan is a strong country, has a strong, huge economy, has is the country of innovation until 10 years ago, more or less. And today is increasing its military power, but in Japan there is not the will to be a superpower. So the key idea is that once that you have a huge, strong economy, once that you have the navy, the tanks, the airplanes, sorry, and once that you are able to innovate, so you have a good technology, you are on the edge of the technology. What you need, these are not sufficient to be a superpower. Europe, Japan. What you need uh, is the will to be a superpower. Well, the will to be a superpower means also to be able to have an idea of the world that can be shared with your partners. To simplify, think about United States. It's easy to identify which are the values. Okay, of course, United States not always follow these values, but usually you can identify United States with freedom, with democracy, an open market, and so on. United States can be a superpower because it's able to share these values with his allies and so can be followed by the partners. Today, maybe in China has not a value, what once we call it an ideology. Think about the Russia until the 90s, the communism, the socialism was an idea, a value, an idea of the world that can be shared with your partners. If you don't have this idea, the will to be a superpower and to share values, an idea of the world, you have the power, but you cannot be a superpower. So you are not able to shape the world according to your preference because the other countries will not follow you.
Okay, that does make a lot of sense.
So
So,
thank you very much. And if you think about, yes, no, it's clear. If you think about, for example, the difference between United States and Europe, it's mainly related to this. Today in Europe, it's very difficult to have a common idea about the future, about how we want to shape the world according to our values. For the United States, it's very simple because democracy and freedom. You can agree with this, but you can share this value with the partners. For China today, it's much more difficult. Have to develop an idea, a vision of the future.
so, so what would be some economic indicators to measure?
Of course, if you want, if uh, we talk about how to measure the powers, the economic indicators make sense, of course. So the dimension of your economy, the GDP, but also the GDP per capita, because you have to take into account of the welfare, the people, the welfare, the overall welfare of the population. And of course, you have to take into account the FDI inflows and the outflow, or in general, the trade flows, to take into account how it's linked to the world, because today is different to imagine a world without trade, and so the inflows and outflow, and of course the level of innovation in an economy, because innovation and technology today is a key element to be a powers and to be a superpowers. Instead, if you look at the different elements, so these are the main economic elements, you should have also geopolitical powers, and this could be much more difficult to measure because geopolitical power is something that is intangible. You can have in your hand, it's difficult. But in general, you can identify as your capability to shape the world according to your preference, or in general, the capability to have a vision accepted and shared with other countries. If you think about the United States as a superpower today, we talk about the decline of United States superpower because a lot of countries, for a lot of countries, no, a lot of countries don't accept anymore or don't want to share anymore the values and the vision of the United States. So it's mainly related to your geopolitical powers and your will to act in the world.
Okay. Okay. So all of that is true, but what about the recent developments that have been happening across the world, with many countries adopting their own currencies for trade deals? For example, India and UAE recently had a bilateral trade deal which proposes the use of rupees over dollars. Uh, Countries like Saudi Arabia and China have agreed on a deal to exchange in yuans, saying that the Petroyuans would be replacing the petrodollars. So, how do you think this would affect the US, since their currency is slowly being washed away as the reserve currency of the world?
Very easy question. Again, okay. The idea is, first of all, take in mind that today the dollar is yet uh, the most important currency, the currency reserve in a sort of way. And this is because more or less 60% of the overall exchange are in dollars. Almost 40% of the overall FDI are in dollars. So today, dollars is yet very important, and the important is mainly related to two elements. First, the stability. The dollar is quite stable. We prefer to have a stable currency to make trade because this allows to have in mind how worth your goods, your exchange, and so on. So we don't like the uncertainty related to the volatility. And the second element is the stability. You can, with a dollar, you can go everywhere, and this dollar will be accepted. So the idea is the value of my dollar is stable, and I can spend this money everywhere. So of course, in the future, these trades are positive because we prefer a more democratic financial market where there is not only a unique currency, but there are a basket of important currency. But the question is related to the stability and acceptability of this currency. So makes sense to have to define your exchange, your trade using a different currency if this currency is acceptable and stable over time. Think about the relation that you said about India and United Arab Emirates. And so the idea is that India will buy, no, you will buy the petals, oils from United Arab Emirates, and these petals will be paid in rupee. But the countries that accept the rupee will be accepted in India, of course. So, but it would be difficult to buy something in a different country. If you want to buy a car in German, you cannot use a rupee. So the question is that can the United Arab Emirates buy enough good stuff in India to spend the 10 billion of rupee for the trade in the oil? This is the key question. So until we don't have other currency stable enough and enough that are acceptable everywhere will be different to reduce the power of the dollars, even if we usually prefer a more democratic financial market where there is not a unique strong currency used everywhere, but there is a basket of strong currency.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in the event that the global superpower does shift from the US, for example, finally a currency does gain enough traction to become a reserve currency in the world, what might be the implications of this on the global economy and financial markets?
It mainly depends on how the shift occurs, if we will have a war or it will be just a change over time, as experimented over time in the history. Depends on the timing, when this will happen. Today, in 10 years, in 20 years. We know that this will happen, but we don't know when. And the final elements depend on how long does the shift require. So again, the time. So it's difficult to predict the overall effects in the markets. And generally, I think that the shift will lead to, for a while, in a higher uncertainty and higher volatility in the markets, in the economy in general. But because when you have a change in the paradigm, when you have a shift from a power to another one, we also have uncertainty. And uncertainty is mainly related to volatility. So this means that we expect to have lower stable outgrow and more uncertainty in the future. But what is important, what is clear for me that independently by the power that the country will take the power, I think that over the last decades we have experimented how the open borders and the trade, capital and people can improve the life of everybody in the world. So I think that we'll have a shift, a change in the future. But I think that the world will be affected, but not so much. So at least some elements will be common. I think that we live also in the future in a world characterized by trade in goods and capital and so on.
Okay, okay. So we talked about how the global superpower would change, right? But how does all of this tie to a normal person, a common man, just a random student or one of our audience who's watching? What does this mean for them in terms of careers or what their future looks like?
I don't know how the future will look like, but I know two things. One thing, just one, that we have experimented a lot of huge change over time. And you will experiment a lot of change in your time, in your life, huge change. Think about what happened over the last 20 years. We had a pandemic, we have the war in Ukraine, we have the shift in the balance of powers between China and United States. We have huge change in the world. And so we have huge change also in the future. So you should be ready to this change. You should not be worried about the change, but you should take the opportunity. What does it mean? To be prepared to this change. And so being curious, studying, traveling, experimenting, discovering a new culture, speaking with other people. So the idea is that if you want to be ready to for the future, if you want to be ready for the new world, you should be ready to change, and you should not be worried about a change. Remember, any change has always something positive. You should be able to take what you have, which are the positive elements, and work on that.
Okay.
So, ready to the change.
Okay. Okay. So with that, we're coming to the end of the podcast. Thank you, Professor Deana. It was a wonderful conversation that we had, and especially for sharing your insights on this captivating topic. It was a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Good luck for your podcast. Is a very, very interesting experiment. Good luck.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye bye.